From E.P.N, this is Your World Discovered. My name is David Ewen. I want to welcome you to the program. My guest today is Chuck Miceli. He is the author of Amanda's Room and also the author of the soon-to-be-released book, Injured Angels. He is the current president of Osher Lifelong Learning Institute at the University of Connecticut. I welcome him to the show. Welcome, Chuck.
Well, thank you, David. Appreciate it, and glad to be here.
Now, long before we thought about you being on this program, we had met at the Connecticut Authors and Publishers Association when I was the keynote speaker, and then you had told me about your book, Amanda's Room, and then when it was released, I bought it. I loved it, and I kept at it, even though with my busy schedule, I kept flipping the pages, and I went to completion. It's an amazing book. But for our viewing audience who have not heard about Amanda's Room, let's hear a little bit about what the book is about.
Okay, thanks. Appreciate it. I'm thrilled that you enjoyed the book. That's why I wrote it. Some authors say that they only write for themselves, and whether or not people like it or not is up to them. That's not me. When I write a book, I envision your face as you're reading it, and my goal is that as you're reading it, you're smiling. And when you're done reading it, you kind of sit back and you take in a deep breath and go, that was worth the time. So Amanda's Room is a paranormal thriller. I actually wrote it originally as a mystery, but people have referred to it most often at this point as a thriller. And so that's now how I refer to it. And there's justification for that. Essentially, I wanted to write something that was totally unique, that hadn't been done before. So where weather is frequently the background of the story, it gets cloudy, it gets rainy, it gets stormy. We know something's about to happen. Well, in Amanda's Room, the weather actually becomes one of the characters in the book. And the premise is, what if weather were not simply a physical happening? What if it was not something that occurred in a natural way, but what if it was actually the result of a conscious act of will? So, in Amanda's Room, the death of a child 18 years ago sets the stage for a supernatural event. Now, Amanda's Room is painted pink. When I worked in criminal justice, my background is mainly in criminal justice. We used to paint cell blocks pink because Baker Miller pink is a shade of paint that actually lowers your physical aggression. You can't be as physically aggressive in a room painted Baker Miller pink. In fact, if you lift weights, there's some videos that show someone who lifts weights can't lift as much weight in a room that's painted Baker Miller pink. Well, that's the color that Amanda's Room is painted, but the paint in her room is tainted. And the tainting of that paint is what sets up the supernatural events. And the book tracks from 18 years later, when a group of college students enter this room, it tracks their experience of coming into the room and then the room's effect on the house, on the area around the house, on the region around that, and eventually on the United States and the entire world. And I don't want to give away too much of it, but the book climaxes with a Class 5 hurricane coming up the eastern coast of the United States and taking aim at New England. And the funny thing was, I had finished the book. It was out. It was just being circulated when Sandy hit. And I'm sitting back watching Sandy coming up the eastern coast and saying to myself, wow. And a number of people have said the same thing.
Now, you have an interesting opportunity to talk with your reading audience. I told you what I thought about it. You just finished the Eastern States Exposition Conference. It's a main event in New England, and it's held in West Springfield. This year, in the year 2016, and during the month of September, the Eastern States Exposition, as they call it, the Big E, celebrated their 100th anniversary, and you were there. Tell me a little bit about what some of the readers said when they got to see you at the Eastern States Exposition.
Well, I think probably one of the things that every author hopes for, certainly I do, and every author I know does, And that is when people are coming through the building and all of a sudden sees you and then looks at the book cover and says, "Oh, Amanda's room. I've heard about that." And I was thrilled this year that so many people coming through the Connecticut building at the Big E did that. And then people would, certainly I'd invite them over, but frequently they would just come over to talk about having read the book. And of course I ask, what did you think of it? I don't ask, and that's important to me, I don't ask, how did you like it? Because it's kind of a loaded question. It almost puts you in the spot where you have to say something good about the book. I want people's honest reaction. And so I will say, what did you think about the book? Or what was your reaction to it? So that they're open to give me constructive criticism as well as positive feedback. And I'm very gratified that that pretty much without exception, the feedback was that people enjoyed it, they were engaged. The biggest thing, and I love that comment, is I couldn't put it down. Especially, and I will tell people who are just thinking about buying it, once I get you in the canoe with Chris and Drew on the pond, I got you. And from that point on, if you can put this book down, you'll be among the minority. And then if you reach the end and you can figure out exactly where I was going, once again, you'll be among very few people. So it was a wonderful experience. I love doing the Big E. I love being in the Connecticut building. I feel very proud that I can say to people, I'm a Connecticut author. And I'm in the building that represents our state. And I give Connecticut very high marks for having hosted the Connecticut Authors and Publishers Association all these years as a literary presence within the state building. That, to me, says a lot about our state and what we have as priorities. And to have a group of authors there throughout the entire Big E event who are there to share their work, their books, I think says a lot of positive aspects about the state of Connecticut. And it's thrilling now that most, if not all, of the other state buildings now have authors' tables in their buildings. And that really originated in Connecticut. So it's wonderful to see now that authors have a fairly large presence at the Big E. And a number of people come back and say, I come here every year to this building specifically because I know the authors are here and I want to support Connecticut authors. So thank you, folks, all those people who do that. That means a great deal to me and to all of the other authors that are at the Big E.
And speaking about being a Connecticut author, the setting of the book covered certain areas of Connecticut and surrounding regions as well.
Well, the book primarily, Amanda's Room, takes place primarily in the Catskills. I've vacationed in the Catskills since I was dating my wife, well over 40 years ago. And I was always struck with the folklore of the area. Ichabod Crane, Sleepy Hollow, in particular Rip Van Winkle, the area of Catskill that we go to, Catskill, Cairo, Leeds, you cross the Rip Van Winkle Bridge to get there. And in fact, one of the aspects of the book, Rip Van Winkle wakes up and is hearing this thundering in the sky, and is told that this is Henry Hudson, I think it was, and his crew bowling in the sky. But there is this sense, and then there's a section of the book where they're driving through Devil's Pass, which is a real place in that area in the Catskills. And the folklore is that when there is thunder in Devil's Pass, it bounces, it resounds off the mountains, one after the other. And so as you're driving through that during a thunderstorm, it's almost like driving through the gates of hell. So I thought, what better place to locate a book which has supernatural elements than in that kind of an area. And so I created this fictitious college, Nattawa, which is actually named after an Iroquois tribe that used to exist in that area. And then Amanda's Room is in this mansion on the very edge of this very rural college campus. And so that's the main setting of the book. The characters do branch out from there. They drive over the Newburgh Bridge. There's a whole chapter that deals with Fishkill Prison. There's another chapter that deals with Cape Cod, and I'm blanking out on the college's name on Cape Cod, the very famous naval Marine College. But that's where the hurricane is coming into kind of the Buzzards Bay area of Cape Cod, and so there is this, as the book continues, this widening out. There's a trial that occurs in Indiana, and in the midst of the trial, the weather changes dramatically, and that also is one of the climatic features. And then finally, toward the end of the book, we trace a hurricane starting off the coast of Africa and coming across the Atlantic and building as it's coming. Just as you and I are talking, a hurricane, a Class 4 hurricane, has just crossed over the Bahamas and Cuba and is now taking aim at the eastern seaboard of the United States, Florida, and then up into the Carolinas. So we trace that. And in fact, if I can take a moment, every chapter in the book begins with a factual quote about the weather. I stole that or emulated that from Ken Follett's why am I blanking out on that name? It's not Code to Zero. I just finished the book. No, I just finished another one of his.
Well, while you're thinking of that, the book has certainly a paranormal theme to it. I am fascinated with the concept of the idea of weather being a character. So there's a lot that can be visualized and imagined. And to help along with that is Amanda's Room is also an audiobook. Tell us a little bit about the audiobook.
Mm-hmm. Very, very pleased with that. A number of people asked me. I think I have a fairly good speaking voice. I'm comfortable in front of a microphone. And so a number of people asked if I was going to do my own audiobook. But I was really intent on getting the next book done. And so rather than taking the time to do an audiobook, because you do audio work and you know how long that takes. This isn't a quick process. It requires many takes, requires a lot of editing. This is a time-consuming process. So rather than do that, I went on audible.com, where you have an opportunity to interview a number of audio talents and have them send you a sample of the work. So you send them a chapter of the book, and then they read from the chapter and they send you samples. And Russell Jonas, who is an actor who was in, I believe, Texas at the time, he is now moved into New York City, and he's doing theater work in New York. He submitted a tape that I brought together a little focus group and said, okay, here are samples. Tell me what you think. And he blew everybody away. Has a great presence, a great speaking voice. And so he wound up narrating the book. I'm, again, very proud of that. That's available on audible.com. It's also available on Amazon. So you can go to one page on Amazon and see the print edition, the ebook, and the audiobook. And the print edition is what's called Whisper Sync enabled, where you can actually read the book, bookmark it. The next morning, get up, go into your car, listen to it on the way to work, bookmark it again, and then when you get back home, listen to it on the way back home, and when you get back home, bookmark it, and then read the text before you go to bed on your Kindle. So that's a nice technology too.
So you have the book available, and I think because you're using Audible, it's probably also available on iTunes as well. As that's part of their distribution as well.
And Apple also, I think. Yeah.
And so you have the paperback, you've got the ebook, you've got the audiobook. And again, we're talking with Chuck Miceli, the author of Amanda's Room. But there's also a forthcoming book that you've been working on that you've alluded to. You had mentioned that you were doing some work with the audiobook, but needed to also put some attention on the other book, the next book that's soon to be released, Injured Angels. Injured Angels. Tell us a little bit about that.
Okay. Totally different. And that's good to give my readers forewarning. Readers sometimes want the series. They want to know, okay, is this the first book of a series? And many authors do that. They pick a particular genre and they do a series. There are 3 books that I have to write. Amanda's Room was one. Amanda's Room gave me an opportunity to get the story out, to build a story, to experiment with engaging readers, with hooks at the end of chapters, with a style of writing that would engage people, bring them in, and hold them until the book was finished. So I had to write that book. The other 2 books are Injured Angels and Black Hell Drowning. And Injured Angels is a completely different kind of book, where Amanda's Room is a paranormal thriller. Injured Angels is really a mainstream to literary novel. It is what I think is an important story. I know too many people who, when they've been in a very close, loving relationship for many, many years, and their spouse or significant other dies, essentially they die too, at least for a time. They feel like their lives are over. They feel like their life has no more purpose anymore without the other person. And so they go through a period of mourning. Now, most of us go through a period of mourning and at some point disengage and pick up our lives and carry on. But some people get caught in that, and they just can't disengage from the grief of losing that person. That's Maureen Bauer, who becomes Maureen Russo, and marries her soulmate and spends 50 years in a very close, supportive, loving relationship with that person. And it's the very closeness that they share that becomes her undoing when he dies. And she cannot disengage from that grief. And she's trapped in that. Now, a number of people who have strong, loving relationships with her try to come to her aid. Family, friends, ministers, etc. But their very love gets in the way of their ability to help. And she is deaf to the support that she's got around her. Until this unconsolable widow meets an uncontrollable social misfit in the form of Doris Cantrell. And Doris really doesn't care about Maureen's grief. She's got problems of her own, and she's in her own survival mode. And so Doris cares about Doris, and she cares about the things that she needs and wants to do. And Maureen is warned about this crazy person. And it's the very craziness of this other woman that causes Maureen to have to give up her dwelling on her grief long enough to manage the relationship so that Doris doesn't do crazy things when they're together. And so these 2 people come together, support, help each other to get through to overcome their weaknesses, not despite their disabilities, but because of them. And then as Maureen moves to the 3rd phase of her life, or what I call her 3rd lifetime, and re-engages with another person in a love relationship, that relationship then threatens the relationship that she has with Doris Cantrell, which has now become this very close, supportive relationship. And then the question is, how do these 2 people manage to deal with that new phase in Maureen's life?
My guest today has been Chuck Miceli. He is the author of Amanda's Room, and we've just been talking about the soon-to-be-released book, Injured Angels. Right now, Amanda's Room is available in paperback, ebook, and also audiobook. Chuck Miceli is the current president of Osher Lifelong Learning Institute at the University of Connecticut. Chuck, thank you for joining me.
David, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it very much.
This is Your World Discovered. My name is David Ewen, and this is E.P.N.